And we are live. It's Transform Your Relationships Live. And do we have a doozy of a topic today? It's what's going on here. We are in a state of lots of tension, and this could be this is not new, but it seems like it's heightened. Would you agree, Roberta?
Oh, absolutely. I think we have a heightened and a generalized anxiety that we really need to acknowledge.
So let's acknowledge it and talk about why we need filters between our brains and our mouths and what comes out of our mouths, really, right?
Well, yes, because it requires some self-reflection and it requires calming ourselves down in quiet time to be able to recognize that we're more on edge than we might think, that we're walking around, if it's a scale of 0 to 10 in terms of arousal in our body and the fight and flight things, we're getting close to walking around at a 3, maybe close to a 4. And at that level, there's not much to go before the body is going to go into arousal. And when it does that, get a little bit brain dead, and then what might come out of your mouth may not serve you well. Certainly won't serve the people around you well, but won't serve you well in the long term.
Yeah, I know that I've had the experience of saying things just, I couldn't even help myself. Not even in this time, but even like previous lives, so to speak. It's just like, and then I feel so bad about myself that I've said it sometimes. But then other times I feel like people are just saying things because that's just the only way they can get things out right now. But it's so damaging in so many ways. And what I also am hearing is people want more connection. They want peace. So where is this disconnect? Why is there such a big disconnect?
Well, let's just look at brain function for a minute. When we're in arousal, any kind of anxiety, any fear, any underlying concerns, our body is also at that. So all our cells are a little bit on alert. And the amygdala at the back of our brain, when it feels any kind of threat, which that is going alert, 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 alert. And it's putting the body on alert that you better be careful, there is lack of safety here. And we may not realize that. So the first thing is to recognize that, like, oh, I guess I am a little touchy, or yes, I am a little nervous. Yes, I am a little anxious, just generally. And it's not saying you're an anxious person or you have any kind of anxiety disorder. It's the world right now. We've got all this barrage of information. We've got unrest. We've got people who don't want to wear masks versus people who say, please wear a mask. We've got people who are outspoken. We've got people going on YouTube and putting up a multitude of Karen videos and Darren videos to show, look how outspoken these people are. Well, we've been living in a culture for the last 3 years that has given permission to people to be rude, people to be self-centered, people to be entitled, people to be lacking in civility, people to let their hate show or their true feelings show, and stopped having any filter. And they've been encouraged to do that. And so the people who just were delighted by that encouragement and model have said, I'm going to tell it like it is. And they're doing that. And then other people are going, oh, let me video you while you do this because you look a fool. And now we're having a whole mess of these videos. I watched a few, can't watch many because it really upsets me at a certain level. But this is what's happening. It's bringing out the side of us that feels a fear, and we want to protect ourselves. And when you're in heightened arousal, the body says alert, and then the body brings blood down to keep your heart and lungs going so you can stay alive. Now, it's not rocket science to realize that when the body does that, it takes it away from the brain. And so you're going to be a little bit brain dead when you think you're being so brilliant, right? So you need to know that about the way the body works so that you can say, maybe best to keep my mouth shut just now.
Yeah, it sounds like it might even be in your best health to do that. You know,
Well,
yeah.
yeah. And just on that topic of health, you do need an outlet for it. You do need someone to talk to. You do need to be able to get it out. But get it out in a therapeutic setting or with a friend or have a vent session or exercise or do something that gets that tension out of your body so it's not coming out of your mouth.
Because you're going to say things that will hurt others and hurt yourself, and you may regret. Get help. You don't need to be rude. Um, Rude culture is deteriorating relationships. And if all we all want is peace and connection, we need to take a look at that. Like if rude is the only alternative you can feel, I have a sense that what you just said about the brain not getting enough blood is the problem. you know I know that being rude is just a way of expelling energy. It's not helpful. It's deteriorating, like I'm saying, the connections we have, the ability to get to peace. And
Mm.
I did a project, and this was about 10 years ago, where I was, and maybe even more, I was interviewing couples in great relationships. And the requirement for a great relationship is that their community, many people in their community had to say they had a great relationship as well. And not that that's the best determinant, but that was my main requirement at the time. But when I went to interview these people, I asked them what was made their relationships great. Why did they also had to think their relationship was great. So not only did their outside community have to say it, but so did they. And they had to be willing to be recorded. So in theory, they had a good relationship. Now, what was the thing that kept coming up over and over again? It was like, no matter what, we're kind to each other. Even if we're mad at each other, we're kind to each other. So you can be mad at people, you can disagree with people without venom, hate, and rudeness.
Yes. Um, just to piggyback on something you said a few minutes ago, I think it's a grand assumption and it's a delightful mythical world that everybody wants peace and connection. I know, you and I talk about it because that's prevalent in our community where we put our energy. It's not true that everybody wants peace and connection. There are a whole segment of people who are hurt or are unhappy or have no power in their life and they want some, and they are only out to get some sense of power, even if it's screaming at the male person. And so they may be longing for peace and connection, but they don't understand that that's their longing. They're first looking for visibility. See me. And if I have to get mad for you to see me, then I want to be seen. And so I think that's very important. And then, to your point that, well, we've got all this going on. And, Ashley Brilliant made this brilliant comment. He said, and speak when you're angry and you'll make the best speech you'll ever regret. And I keep seeing that in these Karen memes because they're losing their jobs, they're losing their positions, they're losing friends, they're losing credibility, they're not getting any goodwill. They're not, someone's not sweeping in to take care of them. They're like, oh, that's offensive. Oh, that's not civil. Oh, that's nasty. Oh, do you really think that? So they're getting more ostracized. They're getting more outside the community that they'd like to be in, perhaps. So, it's important for us to recognize that anger management requires that we first realize when we're in arousal and then get ourselves out of the arousal before we open our mouths.
Yes. So, okay, I've done this. I've gotten aroused, and I feel like that adrenaline surge and the lack of ability to, all I want to do is retaliate, right? And so when I feel that, I say to myself, whoever I want to retaliate at what does not get to have the power here. because
Yes.
that's what it is. It's me giving them power and changing my whole physiology. Why? For them? No. And then I go, I got to talk myself out of this. I, like you said, acknowledge it. Then what do? I ask myself this question: do I want to give them that power? And I'm like, I really don't, but I can't help myself. Yes, you can. I can talk
Yes,
myself out.
yeah.
Yes, I can. Yes, I can. And I just say, yes,
That's where your power is in the yes, I can.
yes, I can. And even if I don't know how at the moment, I could say, yes, I can. Yes, I can. Yes, I can. Yes, I can. And sometimes it just takes distracting myself from whatever that is and going, doing something positive, listening to an upbeat song, calling a friend, going for a walk, and, just doing something positive, drinking a glass of water, just do something different, that I can
Well,
focus on.
yes, and something I tell my clients when they get into this state is do an action that uses large muscles quickly. So jumping jacks, beating the bed, crashing down on the bed with your arms, something that uses large muscle groups and gets yourself clear of that energy physically so that you can then sit down. After you've exercised and you've gotten a little bit out of breath, and then you sit down and go, oh, and there's a dip, and you feel something different.
Hmm.
Then at that moment is the time to say, okay, I took care of the physical. Now, really I'm hurt. Really I'm sad. Really I'm upset that maybe I'm not being respected. Maybe I feel invisible. And you can get in touch with the more tender emotions. Sometimes you just have to take care of those big muscle movements in order to get in touch with things that are a little closer to the heart.
Yeah. And it works. It really does. Try it. Don't just go into this habit of knee-jerk reaction because it's going to not help anything. It doesn't really, it's
Yeah,
just perpetuating things. It seems like things are spiraling now. And if we want to stop the spiral, we have to stop.
yeah.
Stop and breathe. Stop the pattern, just and acknowledge what's so.
Yeah, and hello to Adela. We like having you here too. It's so important for us to realize our personal power, and you brought it up a couple times, and I just want to underline that personal power is very different than power over. And if you understand that difference and you work at cultivating personal power, who do I want to be? What are my values? How am I demonstrating them every day? How do I feel when I do demonstrate them versus how I feel when I don't? Get in touch with that kind of thing. That's where your personal power lies. That's when you can have a thought that you want to use a whole lot of four-letter words in a loud tone, and your filter works and says, oh, but remember, you don't feel good afterwards. Mouth shut, move away, and you start getting some memory of how you want to behave because you want to live from your values. There's very little point saying, let's all get along. Can't we all get along? Can't we all play nicely together? And then be an instigator of misery or an instigator of anger and then justifying it.
I have a
Yes,
question.
sure.
So I hear the words, and I've said these words, live from your values in one way, but now I'm hearing them in another way today for the first time, not because of how you said them, but because I have a new thought around them, which is, I think people may use that as a justification. Well, my religion says this, or I don't agree with that values, and my value is this, so I've got to be rude and forceful and do whatever it takes to make that value known, and that and get really strong-willed about it, type of thing.
Hmm. Yeah.
Maybe
Well,
we should clarify what that means.
you're in charge of your expression of your values for sure. So take responsibility for that. I think it's different. I mean, values. If you say you value family, like many times, unfortunately, I have clients all over the world, and I always ask them when I'm working with a couple, to find out what their shared values are. And it'll come up that someone will say, well, family is really important to me. And I remember one couple where the man said that, and the woman said, huh, you sure can't tell that by the amount of time you spend with us. So it's about the personal demonstration of your values all at the same time. You don't get to say, I have this value, therefore I'm going to yell and scream in your face about that one, but I have this other one that says you should be kind. Well, I'm going to forget that one just now. I mean, it's a package deal. Your values have to all go together. Now, if your values are a package deal and they are, let's use certain kinds of flags all over our truck and go out and use our middle finger as a weapon to tell other people with expletives and things about how they should be living, we just have to observe that and make a decision for ourselves. Not the way I want to live, not the way I want to express, not the people I want to be around. What do I need to do in order to withdraw and go in a better direction? Because you can't go around thinking you're going to change other humans. I mean, yes, we can change a mindset. Yes, we can do things. It's like the whole reason for voting is that we have a voice. But you can't go and change another human being and say, you're not being very nice and you should be. And the other person says, oh, really? Thank you for that information. I'll change immediately. It doesn't, it
Good things
doesn't work
happen
like
sometimes, but.
Well, if you are a civil human being, a just human being, a fair human being, an open and honest human being, a person who has trust and respect and things, and your partner says to you, wow, that was really out there, honey. I don't think you're going to like the playback on that one.
Right.
You might go, oh my goodness, I never thought about that. And we're glad for the momentary hit up the side of the head metaphorically to wake up and hear where we went. But as a general kind of big rule, we can't go around changing people. I mentioned a couple of weeks ago that I was in a store and here in California you have to wear masks, and then a woman had it sitting down around her throat, and I said, oh, your mask has slipped. And she gave me an earful. People might remember that. She said, I'm in HR. I know every single rule there is. Who do you think you are talking to me? And, okay, at that moment, what do? I just watched. There
That's the
was,
most powerful thing, because if you don't say anything, all they hear is their own voice in their head repeating back to themselves. And
well, yeah, if you don't get any pushback, then it's a horrible feeling for the person who's making all of the noise because they're hoping for pushback. They're hoping to be recognized as right. And when you just look at them, I just had a neutral face and I just looked at her. I think I said one other thing. Well, yesterday that changed and that set her off in another direction. So I just looked at her. I couldn't go anywhere. It was a one-way thing in a grocery store. And she was blocking my way. So I just waited. And eventually she went off muttering. She never did put on her mask. I saw her twice more. Didn't have any impact on her. But don't get into conversations with people who are already in full flight in the wrong direction. That's a waste of your personal energy, and your empowerment is to say, oh, that's interesting. That person is having a moment. I don't care to join them in it.
yeah, and like you said, then live from your values. And when we are living from our values that are feeling right and aligned, hopefully generating more kindness and or more personal power versus power over, then we're modeling that. We're actually taking away permission to be rude. If you're modeling kindness, then they're like, oh, like it's almost calling them to be, if you can, by being who you are and living in your values. So yeah, it's really interesting what we have going on up here. It doesn't mean you don't have stuff going on up here that sounds rude, that sounds really nasty. It doesn't mean that. It just means we do some filtering, right? And anything else you want to say about that filter? How do we put that in place?
Oh, yeah, I've got lots of things to say as usual. Yes, we may have, when you just had this experience, you were observing a situation and you didn't see that there was a fire hydrant and you walked into it. Now, I bet that there were some words that went through your mind that perhaps you didn't want the world to hear, but they went through your mind, right? And whether or not they came out of your mouth was your choice. So if we think about a physical injury, I mean, of course, what do you do when you're home alone? You stub your toe. Do you quietly say, "Oh, that was terribly painful. I think I'll just go." No, you don't. But when you're in public, you may have a filter, or you may want to have a filter, or maybe it hurts too much to have a filter, and that's fine too when you hurt yourself. But it's an analogy. When somebody pokes you, you don't have to respond to anything except say stop, right? You don't have to have a judgment. You don't have to make up a story about why they poked you. You don't have to join them and poke them back. You don't have to get into that war of words. You don't have to get into that war of physicality. And so the filter is to know yourself well enough to know how you want to be, what you respect about yourself when you behave that way. And then you practice that in the good times. You practice that when you're not walking into a fire hydrant. You will practice that when you walk into maybe a little disagreement at home, as opposed to a full-on conflagration that's going to burn the house down.
Yeah, well, I've noticed from speakers from stage, a lot of times they'll use curse words and they'll get their anger out, right? And I felt an initial like I was two-minded on it. First, I was like, it's who they are, right? But the other one is now they're getting in the habit of this, and now they're making other people, and people are taking it just mushrooms out, which is like scary to see where it's mushroomed out to. And then I realized when I was growing up, we used, it was okay to use certain words in our household, or or I hung around people who were using certain words, and then I hung around people who weren't, and who actually were speaking about not using that. I was like, oh, well, I could try that on too, and actually it felt better, you know, and to the point when I would stub my toe at home, what came out was not the rudeness or the, like the four-letter words. It was like, ah, dang, or it was some edited version that actually made me feel good that I could respond in that way without this angry, icky feeling words. So I think there's something to what you said in practicing the kind words, the filtering. It doesn't mean you don't feel it. It means you are processing it in the moment.
Yes, and what if in that practicing you even went from "oh dang" to "wow, that really hurt"? A descriptor that trains you to notice what's going on and be able to explain it in terms that are not inflammatory. Like, "Oh, that really hurts." When maybe I broke my toe. Maybe I need to put ice on this. You can talk in different ways to yourself and be empowered. Like, learning to describe how you feel in a moment is a very powerful thing in relationship. And you're in relationship with you. So if you learn to describe that, like, I this morning I had the vacuum cleaner out and I had it unplugged, and I kind of was reaching over to grab something, and I moved forward and I put my foot over the plug, right? You know how that hurts. And
Ow.
my first response was, okay, how unconscious are you that you just walked over something on the floor, right? Because it hurt. But the pain response was, what's up with this? Right now, I'm not always that good. But at that moment, I thought, oh, well, isn't that interesting? I'm now asking myself, why was I unaware that the vacuum cleaner was there? So it's important for us to realize how pliable, how resilient, how open to change our mind can be when we become conscious of wanting to change it.
Definitely.
And that's what we're talking about, because to have a filter between the first response in your brain or your body to what comes out of your mouth is power. That's power. And that's personal power. To be able to choose your thoughts and your words and your actions, that's personal power. And work on you first. You know, we have a tendency to work on other people first. It's important to work on yourself and leave the other people to work on themselves. And this comes down to a very important thing that we've talked about before, but I want to bring it into this conversation is when you've worked on yourself, and you know, in Kaizen for Couples, my book, I talk about the personal weather report. When you've worked on yourself, you realize and master being able to say what's so for you. And when you can do that, that is my definition of assertiveness, which is to know that you have the right to say what you think, feel, need, want, remember, and prefer, as long as you don't mention another human by name or pronoun. So you take 100% responsibility for what's going on, and you don't talk about anybody else. So when you get to that place, when you really practice that, then you can say things that are true for you, and you can say them in ways that are explanatory as opposed to inflammatory.
Hmm. I like to think about it as saying, so you can say almost anything to anyone if you're not saying it without with cruelly, if you're not harming another. So I love that you put a parameter around it. Never use the word you. Never use their word, the you word, or when you do that, kind of thing. The blame words. So, but I love that we also can think about how can I say, I ask myself, how can I say this is what I'm about to say, accusing them of something going to harm them? Does it, what is the feeling in my body? If it's not really clean, if it's not really like I would feel loved hearing that, then it's not. It needs to still process inward. And I love the idea of this is what it is. Mastering personal power is saying what's so for you without harming another, without using another's for blame or judgment or shaming, right?
Yeah, but I would add something to that,
Yeah.
Laura. Everything we say is not loving, but everything we say needs to be clear and not hurtful. And I think that's an important distinction. Like loving I can say, oh, well, I'm going to give you this constructive criticism because I love you.
Yeah.
No, you could keep that
That's
to
not loving
yourself.
though. That's
That's not
using the
that's
word
not
love.
loving.
It's not
Which, which
loving.
is why I wanted to talk about that word, because there is a distinction to be made, which you just made. Like we can say, well, I do it because I love you. How many parents have said, this hurts me worse than it hurts you, and I do it because I love you? Oh no, that's not the case. You've got two levels of thought that's justifying a choice that you're making that's not in the best interest of the child, right? So it's very important that we have a good look at what we're calling loving. Just because we want to do it and we want that other person to do what we want to do, it's not necessarily loving to want them to change to be who we want them to be, and not lean in and be curious about why they are who they want to be. And that's a topic for another day, but it does pertain to having a filter, because if you even have in your head that someone else should behave differently, change it to a could behave differently, or I would prefer it if they behave differently. Own it. Otherwise the judgment is all these people are wrong. I don't know about all those people, but I know what I believe and I know what I value, and that's my job, is to demonstrate and live within what I value and believe every day. And so you can tell that by the way I speak or from my behavior, and that's my job. And so my job then becomes having a filter so that living from what I believe and what I value is what comes out of my mouth.
without harming anybody else.
Yeah,
I
yeah, and
think
without
we have
making it someone else's fault.
right, and I think we have an opportunity here to take on a kindness challenge, to use a filter of kindness. And I would love to say to people like, "Hey, will you take this on? How can you be kind, especially the next time you feel like not being kind?" And
Mhm.
get better and better at it. And what might that provide for us in our relationships, in our world? Whose life might you change just by being kind? I know my life has been changed by someone being kind, and I'm looking for opportunities to do those random acts of kindness and to do conscious acts of kindness in general, and smile through my mask. And um, I heard a story on the news and how people are doing that. Well, waving is nice. Feels like if you have a mask on, people are like, or don't have a mask on, people are like, they're either embarrassed or they're something. I don't know, but I'm just waving to people now that I don't understand why that wouldn't be. Would be a problem. Let's put it that way. So, but maybe they just aren't having a good day. But I just want to, yeah, no. And if anybody makes masks with smiles, let me know. I want to know about them on them because I don't have them, any of those. But I think it
Yeah,
would be great if we just wore a smile all the time and make somebody's day.
I think that would be great. But, we've talked about frequently the thing that I'm always inviting people to do is to learn to communicate in ways that are totally kind and totally honest at the same time. That skill, that's what you want to do. That's your personal power. And that's what's possible if you take on that responsibility and desire that you can learn to communicate in ways that are totally honest and totally kind at the same time. And when you do that, you step into a confidence that you do have a filter. And the filter is just what you said, it's love and kindness and honesty. That,
Mhm.
yeah, I can count on myself because it's going to be kind and honest. And if I don't have anything that I need to be particularly honest about, I can just be kind. So, yeah, take on the challenge, absolutely. And be kind to yourself first.
First. We love that. Yes, be kind to yourself. And that doesn't mean hurting somebody else. It means being really good to you. There's the mirror of the golden rule, which is do unto others as you have done unto you. But how about do unto others as they would like?
That's the platinum rule.
Platinum rule, right? Done unto them, right? So let's take this kindness, gold, and platinum rule together.
Yeah, let's do that. And let's realize your personal power. This is a great time to spend time with yourself and say, how do I demonstrate my values? If I think that it's really important to be kind, let's just use your word. If I say I value kindness in the world, then be kindness in the world. If you say that you value family, then show that you value family. It's really important for us to have a level of peace. If we decide we want to resonate with kindness and we're like this, then it's our job to resonate with kindness. And that's an inside job.
It is an inside job. It's all an inside job. So thank you for being here, everyone. We've had a wonderful conversation about how to do this filter thing, right? How do we go from our heads here to our mouths and be kind and filter, and why we need to do that? Our rudeness culture is actually bringing that to light, and that it is, not helping our relationships, but kindness can, and it builds our personal power to boot.
And if we're going to have any kind of cancel culture, let's cancel rudeness.
Yeah, let's do that. All right. We will see you next time. Thanks, everyone.
Bye bye.